Today's episode is sponsored by Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right below this video. So earlier this week, Republicans dragged Sally Yates into a Senate hearing to investigate their continued conspiracy theories about the Michael Flynn investigation, and it went so poorly for them. Remember that Sally Yates is the former Deputy Attorney General. She's criticized the Justice Department's decision to drop the prosecution against Michael Flynn, who is, as a reminder, the former Trump National Security Advisor who had been indicted. So Republicans have cooked up all sorts of different conspiracy theories, many of which go through Sally Yates, and Republicans control the Senate, at least until January. They brought Sally Yates in to testify via video conference, and it just went so poorly for Republicans. I want to show you a few clips. Now, she testified about how the Obama White House first became alarmed about Michael Flynn's behavior, that Flynn was having secret discussions with the Russian ambassador before being sworn in. He was talking to Mike Pence about things that really stunk to high heaven. So Yates explains that it was investigated, plain and simple. There was really no scandal there. But of course, Republicans have been desperate and continue to be desperate to claim that there was an Obama administration conspiracy to take down Trump that includes the Obama administration illegally spying on the Trump campaign, all of this different stuff. They want to claim that it was investigative abuse and much more. But take a look at how badly this imploded in their faces. Sally Yates facing a very hostile panel of questioning from Republicans. Here's Lindsey Graham, maybe one of the most unhinged, brown-nosing Trump sycophants, trying to play prosecutor. And he doesn't like Sally Yates's answers, so he keeps interrupting. And Senator Patrick Leahy tells him, hey, Senator Graham, just because Sally Yates is a woman doesn't mean you have to keep interrupting her, which is hilarious. And it kind of threw Lindsey Graham off for a moment. Take a look.
Now let's talk about a January 5th meeting. Was the vice president there?
Yes, he was.
Okay. Did he mention the Logan Act?
You know, I don't remember the vice president saying much of anything in this meeting.
So you don't remember him mentioning the Logan Act?
No, I don't.
Did anybody mention the Logan Act?
I have a vague memory of Director Comey mentioning the Logan Act.
Okay, what was he mentioning the Logan Act about? In what context?
Well, I'm not sure if he mentioned that in the Oval Office meeting or in the meeting that he
What
and
do you
I
think about the...
Mr. Chairman, let her answer the question. Just because it's a woman testifying doesn't mean she has to be cut off.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Senator Lee. I really appreciate that. You're very constructive. So here's my question.
Lindsey Graham is so horrible, and he does have a challenger in his Senate race. I want to remind you that Jamie Harrison is running against Lindsey Graham. We could remove, by we, I mean the voters of South Carolina, could remove Lindsey Graham. That's an interesting race to follow and maybe get involved in. Continuing, here's a video of Ted Cruz saying, when did you first learn that the Obama administration was spying on the Trump campaign? Yates says, that never happened. And Ted Cruz visibly flummoxed.
Ms. Yates, when did you first become aware that the Obama administration was surveilling the Donald Trump campaign?
The Obama administration was not surveilling the Donald Trump campaign.
Just a bizarre moment. I mean, this is desperation from these Republicans. And of course, all of this is meant to distract from the disaster after disaster after disaster that is the current Trump administration. And Ted Cruz actually continued to propose things that never happened during his questioning of Sally Yates. And Sally Yates continually had to continue putting him in his place. Take a look at another example.
So a FISA application is not surveillance?
The FISA application was for Carter Page, who was a former member of the Trump campaign at that point.
So your testimony is that the investigation in Carter Page had nothing to do with the Donald Trump campaign?
No, I'm suggesting you asked me if we were surveilling the campaign.
You don't get
And
it
I
both
said-
ways. Is it the campaign or not?
Senator, I'm trying to give you what is the accurate information here. Carter Page was a former member of the Trump campaign at the time that the FISA was initiated.
And what was the reason for the FISA on Carter Page?
There were a number of reasons. First, we had gotten the information that I was trying to point out here, that the Russians had made the overture that they wanted to be able to assist the Trump campaign.
Now, hold on, you said it had nothing to do with the Trump campaign.
I said that he was not a member of the Trump campaign at the time that we initiated the FISA.
Now, the really sad thing is that in Republican circles, they see these same videos and they see this as really brutal questioning from Ted Cruz that Sally Yates fell apart. It's semantic games. It's really a lesson, actually, in how the right makes their arguments. And it's a lot of semantic games and optics. And I wish it didn't work, but it works. If you look at how Republicans respond to Kayleigh McEnany's press briefings, you know, Kayleigh comes out and she scolds the media, and then she always has some scripted walkout that is it makes me cringe when I see it. But there are people who love it. The vapid scripted walk-offs and the attacks on media, many of us accurately see them for what they are, which are just completely empty, vapid, meaningless optics. But there are Republicans who love it. And Donald Trump Jr. will retweet it as Kayleigh owns the media. And that's exactly the same thing that happens with briefings or with testimony like this, where the questions Lindsey Graham is asking, the questions Ted Cruz is asking, they are dumb leading questions. And Sally Yates has no choice but to say, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. But there is a contingent that says, wow, she really fell apart. Let's look at just a tiny bit more. Cruz just keeps going here.
So when they came to you asking to surveil members of the Trump campaign because of conduct they allegedly did while members of the Trump campaign, what due diligence did you do? Did you press back at all? You already told Senator Kennedy you just trusted the FBI. You didn't ask about their sources. You did. I mean, what due diligence did you do before signing off on what we now have significant reason to believe was a profound politicization of law enforcement and intelligence?
Senator, there was a tremendous amount of process back and forth between the lawyers in the National Security Division and the FBI.
Okay, I asked what you did, not other lawyers. What due diligence did you do? You were the one signing off on it.
And with respect to whether the facts were accurate in this instance.
So did you inquire whether it was opposition research funded by the DNC or Hillary Clinton?
Yes, I did have a discussion about that.
With whom?
So it was hours of this stuff, hours and hours. And it's like trying to squeeze water from a rock. It's like there's a lake where all the water is. And that's the disaster after scandal, after embarrassment of the Trump administration. They ignore the lake where you could just go and drink the water. And instead, they focus on picking up rocks and trying to squeeze water out of them and pretending that the lake doesn't exist. And we'd better thank them for trying to squeeze water out of a rock. It's pathetic. It's going absolutely nowhere. But if Trump wins in November, you can expect a lot more of this. The experiment of sending kids back to school during a raging 100-year pandemic by this administration has failed. And it has failed very poorly. And I'm not pleased to see this. And to be clear, I wish it were possible to send kids back to school safely right now. It's become very popular among some on the right to say the left wants to hurt businesses, the left wants to hurt education, the left doesn't care about people's emotional health, all because they want to close in order to hurt Donald Trump. I don't deny for a second that there are tangible benefits, intangible benefits, and psychological benefits to getting kids back to school. I don't deny that many parents can't get back to work unless their kids are back in school. So I get it. The considerations are economic, they're emotional, they're wide-ranging. When you have 50,000 cases a day, 1,400 deaths a day, and we've already debunked the false notion that kids can't catch the disease or spread the disease, it just doesn't pass the sniff test that this would work. And case in point, a Georgia second grader tested positive on day 1 back in school. By day 2, the classroom was closed. The teacher and students were quarantined for 2 weeks and out of school. And there are many of these examples. 260 employees either tested positive or were exposed in Gwinnett County Public Schools in Georgia. That's Georgia's largest school district. Hours after the first day, in an Indiana district last week, the county health department notified Greenfield Central Junior High that a student who had been in a bunch of classrooms all over the school in contact with teachers and students was helping students. I don't remember the exact details, was all over the school, tested positive for coronavirus, and once again caused a mass quarantine of 14 days for everybody that they had been in touch with. We saw what happened in Israel, where they successfully dealt with the virus, crushed the curve. I mean, just obliterated the curve, opened schools, and then things went backwards very, very quickly. So it's not inconceivable that states could open schools. Some states could open schools safely, maybe, but a lot has to happen in order to do that. First and foremost, when we were down to 20,000 cases a day, every state started opening. That was not the time to actually start opening as aggressively as happened. Number two, I know that it's August, but we still don't have enough testing or fast enough testing. The testing is falling behind the viral spread. When we talk about how much we test relative to other countries, remember that at this point, circumstances are so different in countries that in order to keep up with our level of spread, we need dramatically more testing and we need dramatically faster testing. People are often not hearing back for days, 5 to 7 days in some cases. A travel blogger I know waited 20 days for his test results, got them the day before he was going to a different state. This is the same issue we've been talking about for a long time. When it comes to lots of types of businesses and organizations, and certainly schools, where people are even more crowded together for hours all day, there's not an easy answer. I'm not pretending this is simple. I get all of the reasons why we would want to open schools. But what we've seen so far, we have to be guided by the data, tells me the risks exceed the possible rewards. By the spring semester, early 2021, we might have both more effective treatments and vaccines that are increasingly inoculating people. So to me, that says, let's do online in the fall. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying let's do it online. Let's suffer through it. My mom is a college professor. Up until 2 days ago, they were planning on allowing professors to teach in person if they wanted to. Now, my mom had already decided to go fully remote. But because of what's happening now in Massachusetts, which, by the way, is nothing compared to what's going on in some states, her university decided we're doing all remote. It sucks, but it makes sense. It's a mess. It's not political. Masks should be worn. It's not political. It's too early to open a lot of things. It's not political. I'm so glad I'm not in a position of having to send kids to school or not and make decisions about where they should be. I don't envy the parents. I don't envy the teachers or the administrators. I'm not pretending it's easy. I get it. There's not a simple answer, but it's increasingly clear that the safe answer is you've got to do online in the fall. And increasingly, it seems more and more states are going in that direction. Let me know what's happening in your state. Let me know on Twitter @DPacman. And remember, you can listen to the David Pakman Show podcast every day, every weekday. Okay, we take weekends off. On whatever your favorite podcasting app is, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora. It's quite a laundry list. It's almost too easy to get the audio podcast, but I encourage you to do it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist, and what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way. and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Tracy Holly and Victoria Rodriguez. Tracy and Victoria, thank you so much for your support. I also want to thank Mark Ash, who is today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Mark's been a member for almost 5 years, and you can someday be sustaining member of the day. It's down the line, I admit, by grabbing a membership at joinpakman.com. Let's go to the phones at 617-830-4750. Let's go first today to Ronald Reagan, who has been trying to get on for a very, very long time. And Ronald, what's going on today?
Well, I don't know about your framing of trying to get on for a very long time. I mean, I guess kind of. But that's
You've been
true.
sending me tweets saying, I've been calling in sort of stuff.
Well, I wish you would follow me back, David. I want to be friends with you. That's the thing. But
Okay.
So I've got a couple questions for you. You announced a big race to 1 million subscribers on your YouTube with the Majority Report.
So that's completely
implicitly.
that was at the time you asserted. Hold on a second, Ronald. At the time you asserted that, I had not done that. I have since been pushed into a war because Sam fired a shot across the bow saying that I was using bots.
Sure. I mean, I feel like it was implied. I mean, one does not race against themselves. So, I mean,
It's a race against the clock.
At the time at the time, you guys were pretty close, and now you're really pulling away, which you deserve tremendous credit for.
Really?
And I wonder, do you think I mean, you're at 917, and the Majority Report's at 910. I mean, they're really struggling to keep up. Do you think it's a stamina issue for Sam Cedar?
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, you're churning out the content. I mean, you can't be stopped. You're a literal content machine. And he kind of comes on and does his one little show per day. And sometimes he has to have his producers host the show. So he's kind of phoning it in some of the time.
Well, listen, the thing is, Sam is doing more content than me most days. Like, Sam does a 3-hour show. I do a 1-hour show. So I think that what you're saying is empirically wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you don't think it's a stamina issue for Sam then?
I have no evidence that Sam's lacking in stamina.
Okay. So what do you think it is? I mean, that you're just really pulling away here. It doesn't even seem it's hard to call it even a race anymore.
I am not going to necessarily indulge your characterization, and I don't know what's going on. I mean, in my experience, we've had times where we'll get like 8,000 new subscribers in a month, and I'm just doing the same thing. I'm doing my show every weekday. And then we'll have a month like July where we get 39,000 subscribers in a month, and I'm not doing anything different. I mean, I think what is going on is, in general, we're getting closer to the election. More people are interested. But in terms of any discrepancies between my channel and other channels, I don't know what it is. I think these things kind of come in waves.
David, let me ask you a serious question, because I really like your show. I'm being sincere, and I like your show a lot. And so I posted about this, and a lot of people were trying to, dunk on you or whatever. I'm not here for that. One thing that people were saying, this came up a bunch of times, is that Pakman was wrong about the coup in Bolivia. And I don't know anything about that. I wasn't paying attention, I guess, to what you said at the time. And so I'm curious if you want to respond to those people who maybe have that concern. I'm being totally sincere. I'm not trying to start something, but I'm curious what that's all about.
You'd have to ask them. I guess they'd have to call in and tell me specifically what it is they want me to say or whatever. If they're acting in good faith, I'm glad to talk to them. And, you know, as I'm sure you know, many people in this space don't act in good faith. And if that's the case, I mean, I would tell them to call in, because you're not, if you have a specific question, I could answer it. But to say, respond to people whose comments I've not seen and whose arguments I don't know would be difficult to do.
No, that's fair enough. All right. Well, I'll tell people, I'll spread the number far and wide.
Please.
And
I would
I'll
love
look
it.
for your comments. I can respond directly to it. But keep up the good work. Oh, but I was going to say, I think that you guys need to hash out some sort. I mean, there needs to be stakes. It can't just be somebody gets there and then that's it. So, you know, I think the payoff should be the loser has to do Suns Out, Guns Out, tank top shows for a whole week.
You know, I don't
content.
even own what I think is sometimes colloquially and inappropriately described as a wife beater shirt. And I know that that's a very inappropriate term. Some people call it an A shirt or a male tank top. I don't even own such a shirt. So we'd have to first start up a collection to even get me such a shirt.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a problem. That can be arranged.
Good.
All right. Thanks, David.
Okay, Ronald, I appreciate the phone call. Wow. Just a lot happening there. Let's go next to our caller from the 720 area code. Who's calling today from 720?
Hey, David, is that me?
Yeah, who's this?
Hi, this is Gabriel from Colorado.
Gabriel from Colorado. What's on your mind today?
So I know a little while ago, it might have been like half a year ago or something at this point, you were asking about how to maybe, I think you're asking the audience for ideas on how to maybe branch out into the Spanish-speaking sort of content creation area.
Yeah, that was,
that?
I do remember that. And we basically, we evaluated all of the possibilities and decided I really need to reduce my workload by about 30%, and starting to do another show in Spanish was not going to allow me to do that. So we've sort of gone away from the idea.
Okay, I did have a sort of low effort, low time commitment idea to pitch you.
Yeah.
So the idea is you record the show as normal, and then you pick one topic or one story from the show and just re-record it in Spanish. You don't even edit it. You just like a daily one like 5 to 10 minute upload in Spanish. I figured that'd be a pretty low effort way to reach out to a whole new audience.
And let me ask you this. Do I post it to my English language YouTube channel, or do I create a new channel? Because there's sort of, it's a catch-22. If I post it to my existing channel, English speakers will be annoyed that there's Spanish content. If I post it to a new channel, that channel won't have any subscribers, so nobody will watch it.
Well, I was figuring you could grow your Spanish channel over time, sort of just like a little side project. If it doesn't work, no big deal. If it does, hey, look at you, you know?
It's not a terrible idea. I don't think it's a terrible idea, to be perfectly frank. Now, I'm curious, what's your interest in this? Are you a Spanish speaker, or is it more just an effort to reach out to the Spanish community, Spanish speaking community?
I mean, I am trying to learn Spanish. I'm kind of doing a bad job, but I just think it'd be a great way to reach out.
Okay.
And honestly, I think it'd be fun to just listen to you talk in Spanish. I like it when you do. It's kind of neat.
All right. Well, I think that if we were to do it, I think what you're talking about, it's sort of like the push cart model. I learned that. I paid a lot of money for graduate school where a teacher said, come up with a way to push cart test any new business idea. Before you set up a restaurant, you get a little food cart and you test it, is sort of the gist. And I think you're bringing up an excellent idea.
Yeah, sure. Well, there for your consideration.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good work.
I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll talk to you very, very soon. It really is an interesting way to consider doing it. We should look at that. Let's go next to our caller from the 724 area code. Who's calling today from 724?
Hello, David.
Yeah, who's this?
This is Carlo from PA's 16th district.
Love it.
Here we have a terrible congressman. His name is Mike Kelly.
Right.
And I feel like people really underestimate the importance of local elections. I think, people focus way too much on like who's going to be the president, but, people don't really see the importance and the value of people who are representing, their local communities.
I think that you are right in that people tend to, particularly in the space of political hobbyism and infotainment, people tend to spend a lot more time following political issues that may never affect them directly or will only affect them directly in limited ways while ignoring the local issues. And I by no means am suggesting anybody ignore who is their senator or who is the president, but I think the right advice is understand that your day-to-day is going to be affected by your city councilor, if you have a city councilor, the mayor of wherever you live, et cetera. And we want to make sure that people understand that. And Republicans do understand this. That's the crazy thing. They don't necessarily make a big deal out of promoting it. They very quietly take over school boards and city councils, and they get it, and we need to get it as well.
Right. And here, it's a pretty conservative area, but we do have someone who is running against Mike Kelly. Her name is Christy Gnibus. That's Gnibus. And I'm just here to reach out to people, your audience, that, get her name out there. Please donate to her campaign, because here, Mike Kelly has a horrible track record, horrible voting record. He voted against every healthcare bill during this pandemic, he voted against. And he voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act as well, which just unacceptable. His voting record, he's voted alongside Trump consistently. So the plan is to get rid of him. So I would just like to get Christie's name out there.
All right. Well, people should. I am not familiar with her, but I will look into it, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Right. PA 16th District. Thank you, David. Big
All right,
fan of the
thank
show,
you.
by the way.
Appreciate the phone call. Thank you so much. Yes, many, many races to get involved in. Let's go to our caller from the 407 area code. Who's calling today from 407?
Would that be me, Mr. Packman?
Yes, who's this?
My name is Liam. I'm calling from Florida 7th.
Love it.
Anyways, I had my specific question. I feel a lot of my discussions with more right-leaning people, or just maybe even center or even center-left, they have a specific sort of commitment to capitalism because they sort of, have a conflation with markets. For whatever reason, they associate the idea of capitalism equaling markets when they're not necessarily the same thing. Do you feel like that's a big reason as to why people are so adamant in your own interactions with right-wingers as to why they don't want to change that sort of market system?
In other words, that people might like markets and they mistakenly believe that only in capitalism do markets exist, and thus they think they need to support capitalism when you could, for example, support something like market socialism.
Exactly, because I myself,
I think that there's no doubt that the average person probably is not super informed about a concept like market socialism. I actually do think that most people, if presented with the basic framework of market socialism, which would be socialized ownership, but markets still exist. I think a lot of people may not know about it, but if they did, they still wouldn't be for it. But I think that we would only know that if people were aware of it, and many people are not. So I don't think your comment is without merit.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really the only question I had. Thank you for your time, Mr. Paxton.
All right, thank you. And please call me David. We don't need to be so formal on this program. Okay, let's go next to our caller from the 941 area code. Who's calling today from 941?
Hi, David. This is William. I'm from Florida.
William from Florida. What's going on?
Hi, David. I really like your show. I just wanted to put that out there for right now.
Thank you.
So my question's a little broader in spectrum. I've recently gotten into small government politics just because I work in substance abuse field and we get a lot of governmental funding and stuff like that.
Now, William, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you mean small government as in small government conservatism, or just local politics? Do you mean?
Just local county politics.
Oh, got it.
for the
Okay.
most
Okay.
part.
Good. Yeah.
Just mostly I've kind of had to just to learn where the money's coming from, where it's flowing from, stuff like that to help clients get resources and things like that.
Yep.
But one thing that I've noticed since the outbreak is a lot of that funding has kind of disappeared. And a lot of the resources, it seems like people don't know where their phones are. And I was wondering, do you think this is a direct correlation between what's going on in the larger terms politically with Trump and all those things? Do you think that these things can be related? I know that that's a very specific question.
Well, listen.
And for the most part, I realize I live in a red state. You know what I mean?
The answer is probably different in every instance. So there's no question. If your question is funding to specific programs you're interested in being cut because of Trump, the answer would probably be, I have no idea unless we look into it specifically, and probably not. But where I think the more direct connection is that is not getting a lot of attention. You know, there's a lot of talk about if people are unemployed, where do they get money to spend stuff in the economy? Small businesses need people coming in with money to spend. So we've got to get money to people either through unemployment or through stimulus. The part that's being ignored is directly related to what you're bringing up, which is if the government is collecting less revenue from payroll taxes in states that have payroll taxes, and if there are moratoriums on this or that or whatever, states have less money to then redistribute back out to all sorts of different programs. Now, you'd have to look at it at the state by state and program by program level. Like, in other words, is there a specific answer in Florida? I just don't know. You'd have to look that up. But certainly what people have to understand is the state government can only take in reduced revenue for so long before they are going to start saying we can't afford to fund this program and that program. And that is certainly going on.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I've just seen over time, like I said, I work directly with clients. I actually work in a county jail, and I work with inmates rehabilitating them who have dealt with substance abuse. I've dealt with substance abuse. So we have a correlation there, like we can relate on those levels. And so I get emotionally attached to these people a little bit.
Yeah.
And which is part of my job. And then I try to connect them to as many resources as they can to be successful upon exiting the jail system or the prison system. And so it's just been kind of heartbreaking to see, like, and I understand, I get it when you put it in terms like that, as in the government can't give us money if they're not making any, you know. And so, but that's, I thank you for simplifying it to me, because like I said, I'm new to these things. Before Trump got elected, I never thought once about politics. I didn't need to, you know what I mean? So,
do you mind what substance specifically were you struggling with?
Opiates.
And I'm curious, 100%. How did it start? With a prescription from a doctor, or how did it start?
Yeah, I actually had a sports injury in high school, and I was prescribed Percocet, and I was a nerd in high school, so I would freak out if I smoked it, but opiates were the first thing that I took that gave me that feeling of I don't have to think about my problems. It was the absence of pain. So that's where all of that came from. And it was right at the beginning. I'm 27 now.
Yeah.
It was right at the beginning of the opiate crisis.
And so with the legal prescription, you got hooked, and then it continued after you no longer needed them for the injury.
Oh yeah, the obsession had begun. That whole wheel started turning of, well, if this worked this way, if one is good, two is better.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And if that helped with that pain, then maybe from trauma and things like that I experienced in my life that I had never identified before, maybe these other things will work.
And for people who hear this and say, well, why couldn't you just start weaning yourself off slowly? Like, it just doesn't work that way, does it?
No. Well, because you're not dealing with the drugs. It doesn't have anything to do with the drugs. The drugs are just the most highlighted part of the problem.
Right.
Right? Like, because we all experience vices in our life, whether it's with money or sex or power. You know what I mean? But that is the easiest way for someone with an addictive personality, because it's instantly gratifying, right? Just like spending money on a pair of shoes that you didn't really want to begin with, right? You just wanted to hear that ka-ching sound.
Yep.
And so yeah, that's it's not as simple as just quit. But I understand why people say that, because explaining to addiction to a quote unquote, like, to a person who's never dealt with it is almost like explaining yellow to a blind person. Like, it's really difficult, even if they really want to understand, even if they love you or respect you. So that's partially been my job as well, is to talk to these representatives and things like that about that, and get them to understand, why it is that people do need help, why they need those resources, and they need, some attention. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. William, well said.
Thank you so much for your
thank
time,
you.
David.
Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, take care. We're going to go to a quick break. If you are holding, don't hang up, because we'll go right back to the phones after this short break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's get back to the phones at 617-830-4750 and see what's on people's minds. Let's go to our caller from the 785 area code. 785 has been a very controversial area code for the show. We have a long history with it. Who's calling today from 785 today?
Hey, is that me?
Yeah, who's this?
Hey, David. My name's Brad. I'm a senior at a high school in the 785 region. I'm new to watching you, so I'm not familiar with all the controversies regarding my area code.
Well, let me just put it this way. Clearly, you are not the Kansas troll, so we can just skip any other discussions and move on to what you want to talk about. Yeah.
All right, cool. I've got two questions. I don't know if that's too much, but
please.
So we have YouTube, Twitch, like a bunch of variety of internet media now, and as far as I can tell, with the type of crowd I hang out with, which is a mix of right-wingers and left-wingers, a lot of young kids are being, like, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but are being fed a lot of abstract political theory at a very young age. And I heard you say, or actually I looked at an article about you that said you sort of critiqued Sanders' embrace of socialism last year, like the word socialism, at least, like pure socialism, not democratic socialism. And do you think that that's only a problem within the older generation being a large voting bloc? And do you see that problem that you pointed out of the word socialism being embraced going to like end soon when my generation becomes a big part of the voting bloc?
Well, the answer to that question is you will be answering that. I can't answer that. If you're saying, is your generation going to embrace actual socialism? I can't answer that for you because it's up to your generation. There's a couple things I would say. One, the future of socialism in the United States is going to be dictated by really two primary things. One, do the people saying they want it actually know what it is? And part of the confusion, I mean, even when you say socialism versus democratic socialism, the real question is socialism versus social democracy. Democratic socialism, as traditionally defined, is socialism. What I think you mean is social democracy in the sort of Northern European style. So the first question is going to be, does the word socialism get completely redefined to mean social democracy, or are people in your generation actually clamoring for socializing the means of production? I mean, to ask you, which do you mean when you talk about socialism?
That's a great question. I say a lot of people who watch a lot of like theory or read a lot of theory, like sort of are okay with the idea of socializing lots of industries, like more than just the resource industries that that Venezuela and Norway has done, like oils and stuff. But as far as like how they like express their views through their voting and express their views through like political candidates and such, I really only see as a social democracy being like the only way to express like far left thought now, at least.
Okay, so that gets directly into part two, which is, if you are an accelerationist, then your belief would be that the path to socialism, however you define it, is a sort of breakdown of the current system that we have to be rebuilt directly into socialism. My view is an incrementalist view, because I believe that when you look at history, that's the way that it has worked. And so no matter what your definition of socialism is, whether it is as far to the center as social democracy or as far to the left as, you know, Marxist Leninism or whatever it may be, the next step, I believe, is social democracy either way. So the immediate question is the entire left that is at social democracy and further left going to unite around social democracy? Because I think we should all recognize, no matter what we see as the end point, that's the next stop on the train, so to speak.
Most definitely, yes. I have one more question. Hopefully this doesn't take too much time.
Sure.
But my question is there any political issue today that you believe some sort of violence is justified? For example, like the rioters, would you say they're justified in property damage, even though it's not like all of them who are doing it, obviously, as some right-wing pundits try to make out the picture to be? Like, is there any structural issue in society that you believe the only way to get a large majority of Americans to like pay attention and wake up to is through political violence to get that message on TV?
Okay, so this is a really big topic and a great question. Let me say a few things about it. First of all, I'm going to stop short of like moralizing whether it's morally justified to turn to violence to achieve political means right now. I want to stop, because that's just a kind of a matter of opinion. Where I'm going to kind of take it from a more pragmatic perspective. Number one, the question I would ask is, have other means short of violence been tried? Because if they haven't, I think that we should be trying those first. And as an example, mass rallies in urban centers, strategic defaults to cripple the financial system, strategic work call-outs. There's a whole list of things I give in my videos that I've done about how activism can be more effective than signing a petition and calling your rep, that have not been tried yet. And so for me, from a pragmatic perspective, I would try those things first before I go to violence, because there's a smaller risk to the individuals doing them. The second part is, from a practical perspective, you can look at old videos of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King weighing in on this issue. I am much more pragmatically aligned with Martin Luther King, who said, even if you can morally justify the violence, in practice, it very often ends up hurting the very people who we on the left are trying to help through the violence. And so I also don't want to suggest people do things which may actually most hurt those we are trying to help. So I don't know if that's an answer. I'm not answering the morality part of it, but I hope I'm giving you a perspective on the practicality of it.
Yeah, no, that was a great answer. It's just that there's just a huge conversation, like whether, I mean, there was a book released 10 years ago called The New Jim Crow that's like a huge critique of the criminal justice system now.
Of course.
And it seems like not a lot has changed policy-wise. Like, I don't know if you saw the ad, I believe it was earlier this year, but it was like Trump saying he passed major criminal justice reform, which is a joke. But yeah, I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that topic. I'm a new viewer. I haven't seen too much of your videos, but I'm watching now. So
well, I'm glad to have you, and you're thinking about a lot of important issues, and I appreciate you calling in.
Yep. You have a good one.
All right, take care. Okay, that is going to do it for live calls for this week. As always, I do have to apologize. I throw myself at your mercy. I was not able to get to every caller, but we will take calls again, and I hope to hear from you next time. We'll take a quick break and be back with more show right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The audience questions have been pouring in sort of like a fire hose, and maybe not surprisingly, as we get closer to the November election, more and more of the questions relate to the election, but not all of them. The first one I got is, how much of America will refuse the coronavirus vaccine? And will this prevent us from getting to herd immunity? It's really an empirical question. It's not, we can speculate about motives and we can look at polling to figure out part of the answer, but part of this is an empirical question in terms of, will we get to that magic number that we need in order to reach herd immunity? Now, herd immunity, there's a little bit of confusion about herd immunity. There are folks who email me and I can tell that they don't realize the level of immunity to reach herd immunity depends on the disease. So if a disease is much more contagious, like for example, measles, which has an R value of somewhere between 16 and 18, I'm going from memory here. Measles is so contagious, it spreads so easily where it can be aerosolized, where you go into an elevator after someone has already left the elevator and they might have been carrying it and you could catch it. It's a huge level of contagion, far more than coronavirus or the flu. It's so contagious that you need like 95% immunity to reach herd immunity, which is why it's so important that everybody be vaccinated against measles. When the condition is less contagious, when the disease is less contagious, like coronavirus, which is more contagious than flu, but far less contagious than measles, the level of immunity required for herd immunity is lower. And the estimates are that for coronavirus, it's about 70% rather than measles is 95%, because coronavirus spreads less easily than measles. So we need to get to 70%. Now, you can get to that through a combination of naturally acquired immunity from people who have recovered from the disease and immunizations, people who have been vaccinated. Now, there's an open question as to how long you are immune after recovering from coronavirus. We don't know the answer to that yet, but hypothetically, you could get your 70% if 5% of the population has recovered naturally from coronavirus and 2/3, 66% get vaccinated. That gets you 71%. You are at herd immunity. The sad reality of the situation is that we have two polls, one from right around June 1 and one from July 1, roughly, where only about half of Americans say they plan to get the vaccine. There's an AP NORC poll from May 27, where 50% of Americans say they would get a coronavirus vaccine. And then June 30th, a different poll, which says that, again, about 50% of Americans plan to get the vaccine. Now, it's been 5 weeks since that latest poll. It's conceivable that because of the continued spread, deaths back up to 50, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 a day, that more people are now planning to get the vaccine. Now, this is simple math. If you need 70 and half plan to get the vaccine, to get to herd immunity, that means you need an additional 20% of the country to recover naturally. 20% of the country is about 66 million people. That would imply a 660,000 person death toll, estimating roughly 1% of those who get the virus die. Now, that's the simple math. The reality is, when you look at more complex and detailed contagion models, you don't literally need 70% for this reason, and I want to try to explain this correctly. You don't come into contact with everybody in the country. So in reality, your risk of contagion is not so much about is the country level, at a country level, do we have 70% immunity? But it's more related to what's going on in your immediate surroundings. And because we have dramatically different urban versus rural, or rural, as Trump says, situations in the United States, you probably would get a practically speaking, herd immunity somewhere short of 70%, because not the entire population is not regularly coming into contact with the entire population. You're mostly coming into contact with some limited group of people when you're going to work, when you're going to your grocery store, et cetera. And so the real number is a little short of 70%. But regardless, if only half the country plans to get the vaccine, we need 20% to get the virus in order to reach herd immunity. And that means a lot of people are going to die. That would be another 500,000 people compared to where we are right now. Very, very ugly. I hope that it's not the case. I hope people change their minds. But the polling so far is extremely disturbing. Next question today. David, if Trump does delay the election, can you tell me definitively who becomes president? I've heard Nancy Pelosi. I've heard Chuck Grassley. I don't really understand. Okay, so this came up briefly in a voicemail earlier this week, but let's go through it again. If Donald Trump delays the election enough, and again, I'm not debating here whether he can do it, how it could be done, how much he would do. I don't want to do that stuff because there's all sorts, the electors have to vote. I believe it's in the first half of December. And there's other dates, and elections are run by the states. These are 50 state decisions, more than they are anything that Donald Trump would do. So let's skip that piece for now. But let's imagine we get to January 20th and there has not been an election. Trump doesn't stay in power. Trump stops being the president. Now, when you look at the line of succession, okay, it would go from president to vice president. But Mike Pence also would no longer be vice president. Well, then it would go to the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Well, if the election in California doesn't happen, she is no longer elected. So she's no longer Speaker of the House. So it would skip her. So eventually it would go to the Senate pro tem. Now, currently, the Senate pro tem is Chuck Grassley, a Republican, because Republicans have the majority in the Senate. But the problem is that 35 Senate seats are up for election in November. Of the 100 Senate seats, if those 35 elections don't happen, again, we're assuming none of the elections happen. You might have some states do the election, but not enough to select a president. But let's skip that for now. If those 35 Senate seats end up being open, you now only have 65 senators. And that means that the Democrats would have a majority because Republicans have far more seats to defend in November than do Democrats. So if none of these 35 elections happen, Republicans lose more seats than Democrats. You then have no president, no vice president, no House, but you have a Senate made up of the 65 remaining senators who are more than 50% Democrats, meaning Democrats get to select a Senate pro tem who becomes the president until this is resolved. Now, historically, again, this is our best understanding. Producer Pat and I have been researching this. This is our best understanding. Historically, Senate pro tem tends to go to the most senior senator from the party. Right now, that's Vermont's Patrick Leahy. However, it's conceivable that if the 65 remaining senators knew that by electing a Senate pro tem, they were essentially selecting the next president, it's conceivable they would pick someone other than Patrick Leahy. But that's the scenario, as I best understand it today, that would determine who is president if we don't have a presidential election in November. Now, let me go back to what I said when I commented on James Clyburn earlier this week, saying I think Trump is going to, after he loses, use some kind of emergency to stay in power. I believe that our coverage of that possibility needs to focus around the idea that the mere suggestion of delaying a federal election, which has never happened, is a despotic, authoritarian, dystopian nightmare. Now that I was asked the question, what exactly would happen? I've answered it to the best of my ability. I don't think that's where the focus should be. The focus should be that Trump even floating this idea is completely outrageous. We vote in this country. We figure out how to do it. States are expanding absentee ballot access, universal absentee voting, as I'm calling it. And we're going to have an election. and Donald Trump is going to either win or not win, and things are going to happen on the schedule they're supposed to. That has to be the default conversation. Once you start engaging in what would justify delaying it or what would be the mechanism for delaying it, academically, it's interesting, but it's problematic when it becomes a corporate media dialogue, which only legitimizes the idea at its core. So that's my take on that. Hey, David, are anti-Trump Republicans sort of a third party now? Will they become a formal third party going forward? My instinct is no. And I know that a lot of you have been following very closely groups like the Lincoln Project, which are made up mostly of disaffected Republicans who believe that the Republican Party under Donald Trump is not really the Republican Party of pre-Donald Trump, which is true in many senses. And could this split off? Could this permanently fracture the Republican Party? I think the answer is no, and it's no for a couple of different reasons. Number one, if the Republican Party more formally fractures, and you've got sort of like the Trumpian Republicans and then more traditional pre-Trump Republicans, it helps Democrats dramatically because it splits the right-wing vote. Republicans know this, and so it would be dealing a huge amount of self-inflicted damage. If the Democratic Party doesn't split, a split in the Republican Party destroys the possibilities of many Republicans from getting reelected. So on a practical level, I don't think they're going to do it. But there's another reason, which is that until I see evidence otherwise, these groups like the Lincoln Project and other anti-Trump Republicans, Mitt Romney, et cetera, this is temporary. If Biden wins, things go back to the way they were in terms of their opposition to Democratic policy, Democratic ideas, even when the Democratic ideas are only marginally more left than the mainstream Republican ideas, as they are in some cases. The Lincoln Project is it's a pre-Trump Republican Party. And that means that it is immediately going to go back to saying what Joe Biden wants to do is bad. Joe Biden building a climate proposal on the Green New Deal is bad. Joe Biden wanting to uncap Social Security earnings and eliminate the stepped up basis clause and they're against all of that stuff. And so, but my belief is that this ends as soon as Donald Trump is out of office. Now, there's one sort of caveat to this. A lot of these anti-Trump Republicans have said they aren't going to go back to the Republican Party. That the idea being they've burnt their bridges, that by opposing Donald Trump, they've also ruined relationships with some of the more traditional mainstream Republicans who are falling in line with Trump, and that's an irreparable relationship. Number one, history tells us otherwise. Politics makes strange bedfellows. Grudges that seem unforgivable, so to speak, end up being forgiven either explicitly or implicitly, and those same alliances end up being formed. So I just don't believe that the bridges have been burned permanently. The bridges can be rebuilt. But number two, you can be out of the Republican Party in some kind of strict technical sense and still oppose Democrats and still end up voting for future Republican candidates. So it's partly that I don't believe them, but partly it could be a technicality. Now, in terms of my view, I would love multiple parties and I would love a different voting system. I've said before, the best path to empowering parties other than Republicans and Democrats in the United States involves serious campaign finance reform, number one. And number two, a different voting system than first past the post, because for as long as we continue to have first past the post, the spoiler effect of supporting a third party candidate is too great. If I love the Green Party and then would vote Democratic and really don't want a Republican, I risk putting the Republican in office by voting for the Green Party. If on the right, I'm actually, I don't know, some far right neo-Nazi and I want David Duke, but if it's not David Duke, I'd prefer Trump. And I really don't want Joe Biden. If I vote for David Duke, if he were running, I actually risk putting Joe Biden in office. So we've talked about that before. I'm not going to delve into that in more detail now, but I would prefer multiple parties. I would rather do away with the two-party duopoly. I'm very interested in proportional representation systems, the likes of which we have, we see in other countries, although I understand the risks of that and I'm not ignoring them. But until we do campaign finance reform and have something other than a first past the post system, unless we go in the direction of proportional and really think through what that would look like, we're going to see the two-party duopoly maintain. And that is an unfortunate reality that we have to contend with. We have a tremendous bonus show for you today. Get instant access to it, instant, by becoming a member at joinpacman.com or becoming a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Thanks so much for watching today's full episode of the show. Just a reminder, today's sponsor is Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist for free and save 25% off of a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've also included the link right underneath this video.